My boss fired me to save his hedge fund. 3 years later, my company bought his. The day I was fired, the stock market was crashing. Most people inside Titan Capital thought the layoffs were temporary. I knew better. My name is Nathan Cole. For 11 years, I worked as a quantitative analyst at one of the largest hedge funds in New York. My job wasn't glamorous. I didn't appear on television. I didn't ring the opening bell at the stock exchange. I built financial models, algorithms, risk management systems, the invisible tools that protected billions of dollars. Most investors never knew my name. But every major decision passed through software my team created. I loved the work. Numbers made sense. People didn't. Our CEO, Marcus Whitmore, often told investors that Titan Capital's success came from disciplined leadership. The truth was different. Success came from hundreds of analysts working behind the scenes. People like me. Then artificial intelligence changed everything. In early meetings, I proposed building an AI platform capable of analyzing earnings reports, supply chains, interest rates, and global news in real time. The technology wasn't designed to replace investors. It was designed to help them make better decisions. I presented a detailed plan. Projected returns, risk controls, estimated development costs. I believed it would transform the company. Marcus disagreed. He called it expensive, unnecessary, too risky. The board sided with him. The project died. 6 months later, market volatility exploded. Several billion-dollar trades went badly. Clients became nervous. Investors started withdrawing money. Titan Capital needed someone to blame. That someone became me. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Marcus invited me into his office. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. We're restructuring. I understand. Today will be your last day. I wasn't angry. Not immediately. I was disappointed. Not because I lost my job. Because I knew exactly what the company was giving up. As I packed my desk, one thought refused to leave my mind. If Titan wouldn't build the future, I would. I invested nearly every dollar I had. I rented a small office in Brooklyn. 3 former coworkers joined me. Nobody else believed our idea. Banks rejected us. Venture capital firms laughed. One investor actually told me AI would never matter on Wall Street. I thanked him for his time. Then kept working. For 18 months, our salaries barely covered rent. Some weeks, we wondered whether payroll would clear. But the software improved every day. Instead of trying to predict the market, our system measured risk better than existing platforms. That difference changed everything. The first customer wasn't a hedge fund. It was a regional bank. Then an insurance company. Then a pension fund. Soon, institutions from Europe and Asia requested demonstrations. Within 3 years, our platform monitored more than $90 billion in financial assets. Financial magazines called us one of the fastest growing fintech companies in America. Ironically, Titan Capital became one of our biggest potential customers. Then something unexpected happened. Marcus Whitmore called me personally. The same CEO who fired me. The same CEO who rejected every idea I presented. Now he wanted a meeting. He didn't ask to buy our software. He wanted something much bigger. Titan Capital was running out of cash. Several major investors had withdrawn their money. Performance had collapsed. Competitors were attracting clients using newer technology. Marcus wanted to discuss a strategic partnership. I agreed. Mostly because I wanted to hear what he had to say. When I entered Titan's headquarters, almost nothing had changed. The marble floors. The expensive artwork. The executive offices. Everything looked exactly the same. Except the atmosphere. People weren't smiling anymore. Employees avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when executives walked by. Fear had replaced confidence. Marcus greeted me with an awkward handshake. He looked older than I remembered. More tired. After a few minutes of polite conversation, he finally reached the point. We need your platform. I remained silent. We're prepared to pay. Still silent. Then he said something I never expected. We're also open to discussing an acquisition. For a second, I thought I misheard him. An acquisition. Marcus nodded. We're willing to buy your company. I couldn't help smiling. 3 years earlier, he believed my technology wasn't worth funding. Now he wanted to buy the entire business. But before I answered, our legal team requested access to Titan's financial records. Standard due diligence. Marcus agreed. Within 2 weeks, our accountants uncovered something strange. Titan's losses were far larger than public reports suggested. Several investment funds had been reporting unusually stable returns despite extreme market volatility. The numbers didn't add up. Not even close. Then our auditors found a series of transactions involving offshore entities. At first glance, they looked like routine international investments. The deeper we looked, the more unusual they became. Money moved through multiple jurisdictions. Ownership records disappeared behind layers of shell companies. Internal approvals carried digital signatures that didn't match archived files. Someone had been manipulating more than investment performance. Someone appeared to be rewriting the company's financial history. When our chief compliance officer finished her review, she quietly closed the folder. Then she looked directly at me. Nathan. Her voice was unusually calm. This isn't just bad accounting. I frowned. What is it? She slid one final document across the table. If we're right. She paused. Quote. Titan Capital isn't preparing to buy us. I looked at the report. Then at her. What are they preparing for? She took a slow breath. They're preparing to disappear. At that moment, I realized this wasn't going to be a normal business negotiation. It was the beginning of the biggest financial mystery of my career. The words stayed with me long after the meeting ended. They're preparing to disappear. I had spent more than a decade studying financial markets. Companies went bankrupt. Funds collapsed. Banks failed. But legitimate businesses didn't simply disappear. Not without leaving a trail. Titan Capital managed billions of dollars for pension funds, universities, charitable foundations, and wealthy families. If the company vanished overnight, the damage would ripple through the entire financial system. There had to be another explanation. I hoped there was. The next morning, our board approved a full forensic review. Every transaction. Every subsidiary. Every investment vehicle. No shortcuts. No assumptions. If we were going to enter any partnership with Titan Capital, we needed to understand exactly what we were buying. 3 days later, my chief technology officer walked into my office carrying a laptop. You need to see this. He connected it to the conference room screen. At first, it looked like an ordinary network diagram. Then he zoomed out. Hundreds of companies appeared. Holding companies. Investment partnerships. Trusts. Private funds. Each connected by ownership records. Each linked to another. The structure looked less like a corporation. And more like a maze. Our AI found something humans missed, he said. I leaned closer. What am I looking at? He highlighted one small company registered in Delaware. The business reported only 2 employees. Annual revenue of less than $1 million. Nothing unusual. Until he overlaid banking records. That tiny company had quietly received more than $480 million over 7 years. No legitimate consulting firm with 2 employees should ever process that amount of money. Someone was hiding enormous transactions inside businesses nobody would question. The AI kept uncovering patterns. Money entered one company, moved through 4 others, crossed international borders, returned to the United States under different ownership names. Every path looked different. Yet all of them eventually connected to one destination. A private investment partnership called Northbridge Holdings. None of us had heard of it. There was almost no public information. No interviews. No corporate website. No executive biographies. Just legal filings and financial registrations. That alone raised concerns. Then our legal director noticed something else. Northbridge Holdings owned nearly 8% of Titan Capital. Quietly. Without attracting attention. 8% was enough to influence major decisions. But not enough to attract headlines. Whoever built Northbridge understood exactly how to remain invisible. The more we investigated, the stranger everything became. Every trail stopped at attorneys. Trust companies. Nominee directors. Professional managers. Real people were almost impossible to identify. Then our AI flagged a familiar name. Marcus Whitmore. Titan's CEO. He wasn't listed as an owner. But he had attended 6 private meetings with Northbridge representatives over the previous 4 years. None of those meetings appeared in official corporate calendars. None were disclosed to shareholders. I immediately called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. We need to talk. His voice sounded unusually calm. I know. Today. No. His answer surprised me. I'll come to you tonight. Exactly at 8 o'clock, Marcus arrived alone. No assistants. No lawyers. No security. He looked exhausted. Before I could ask a question, he placed a thick folder on my desk. I should have told you years ago. I opened the folder. Inside were confidential board minutes. Private letters. Loan agreements. And one document marked strictly confidential. Marcus watched as I read. Then he quietly said, Titan stopped being independent a long time ago. I looked up. What does that mean? He took a deep breath. Northbridge doesn't invest in companies. They controls them. The room fell silent. Marcus continued. They approached us 8 years ago. They offered capital when markets were weak. At first, everything looked normal. Then the conditions changed. They wanted board seats. They wanted access to internal data. They wanted influence over investment decisions. And eventually, he paused. They wanted control. I stared at him. Why didn't you tell anyone? Marcus laughed bitterly. Who would believe me? He wasn't entirely wrong. Without evidence, it would sound like paranoia. But the evidence was now sitting on my desk. Then Marcus revealed something even more disturbing. The losses everyone blames on bad investments. He shook his head. Weren't accidents. They were designed. My heartbeat quickened. Designed by who? Northbridge. According to Marcus, profitable funds had been quietly merged into weaker portfolios. Healthy assets were sold too early. Risk limits were adjusted. Key executives were replaced. Everything happened slowly, patiently. The goal wasn't immediate profit. The goal was to weaken Titan until shareholders accepted outside control. A corporate takeover without a public battle. One decision at a time. One quarter at a time. One crisis at a time. The strategy was brilliant. And terrifying. Then Marcus looked directly into my eyes. Nathan, if you continue this investigation, they won't just come after Titan. They'll come after your company. I wanted to dismiss the warning. But before I could respond, my assistant knocked on the conference room door. She looked pale. Sorry to interrupt. What is it? She handed me her tablet. My stomach dropped. Breaking news. One of our largest institutional clients had announced it was terminating our technology contract. Another client had suspended negotiations. Within minutes, 2 more alerts appeared. Our company's stock had fallen nearly 12% after anonymous reports questioned our financial stability. I looked at Marcus. He didn't seem surprised. They've already started. For the first time since launching my company, I realized this wasn't simply a battle over technology. It wasn't even a battle over Titan capital. It was a battle against an organization powerful enough to move markets, influence investors, and quietly reshape billion-dollar companies from behind the scenes. And somehow, my company had just become its next target. By the following Monday, our headquarters felt like a different company. Employees still came to work. Meetings still filled the calendar. The software team continued releasing updates. From the outside, everything appeared normal. Inside, nothing was. Our communications department tracked more than 200 negative stories about our company in less than 72 hours. Most were anonymous. Some quoted industry insiders. Others cited unnamed financial sources. None contained enough false information to qualify as obvious defamation. Yet together they created doubt. And in business, doubt spreads faster than facts. Our investor relations team worked around the clock answering questions. Was our balance sheet healthy? Were we losing major clients? Was our AI platform secure? Had regulators opened an investigation? Every rumor forced another explanation. Every explanation consumed valuable time. Exactly what our attackers wanted. Late Tuesday evening, I called an emergency meeting with our board. No press. No advisors. Only directors. I stood in front of the screen and showed them everything we had uncovered. The hidden ownership structures. Northbridge Holdings. The suspicious transactions. Marcus's documents. When I finished, nobody spoke. Finally, the oldest director in the room folded his hands. I've spent 40 years on Wall Street. He looked directly at me. I've seen corporate raiders. I've seen hostile takeovers. I've seen financial fraud. But I've never seen anything organized like this. Another director asked the question everyone was thinking. What do they actually want? I answered honestly. I don't think they want our technology. Confused expressions filled the room. They want something much more valuable. The trust institutions have placed in us. Banks. Insurance companies. Pension funds. Universities. Government retirement systems. Our software processed risk for organizations responsible for hundreds of billions of dollars. If someone controlled that technology, they wouldn't simply own a software company. They would gain influence over financial decisions across an enormous part of the market. Silence returned. Everyone understood the stakes. The discussion continued past midnight. By the end of the meeting, we approved 3 immediate actions. First, strengthen cybersecurity across every system. Second, move sensitive research into isolated servers. Third, delay all merger discussions with Titan Capital. If Northbridge wanted access, they weren't getting it through us. The next morning I arrived before sunrise. Security had already increased. New access procedures. Additional guards. Temporary identification checks. It felt excessive. Until 8:17 a.m. My chief information security officer burst into my office. There inside. I stood immediately. Inside what? Our network. Within seconds, the operations center came alive. Engineers monitored thousands of systems. Large screens displayed unusual activity. Someone had launched a coordinated cyberattack. Not ransomware. Not data theft. Something far more sophisticated. The attackers weren't trying to destroy information. They were trying to quietly change it. Risk models. Performance reports. Client dashboards. Small changes. Tiny numbers. Adjustments so subtle that many customers might never notice. But if unnoticed, financial institutions could make billion-dollar decisions using inaccurate information. The consequences would be catastrophic. Fortunately, our engineers reacted quickly. Critical systems were isolated. Backup servers activated automatically. Within 45 minutes, the attack was contained. Contained. Not defeated. Because whoever planned it had already learned something important. They now understood how our systems responded under pressure. That realization unsettled me. Later that afternoon, federal investigators requested another meeting. This time the atmosphere was different. More urgent. The lead investigator placed a sealed envelope in front of me. We've identified Northbridge's founder. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. A woman in her early 60s. Silver hair. Simple business suit. No public profile. No magazine covers. No television interviews. Her name read Evelyn Mercer. I frowned. I've never heard of her. The investigator nodded. Almost nobody has. He explained that Mercer had spent decades avoiding publicity while quietly acquiring stakes in financial firms around the world. She rarely appeared in corporate records. She never served as CEO. She almost never spoke publicly. Instead, she influenced companies through private partnerships, advisory boards, and investment structures. Invisible. Until now. Then the investigator slid another document toward me. My pulse quickened. Evelyn Mercer had recently purchased shares in my company. Not enough to trigger headlines. Just enough to establish a position. Exactly the same strategy used years earlier at Titan Capital. She wasn't reacting to our success. She had been planning for it. Long before I realized we were even being watched. I looked at the investigator. What happens if she succeeds? His answer came without hesitation. You won't lose your company overnight. He paused. You'll slowly lose control of every important decision. Board appointments. Executive hires. Capital allocation. Strategic direction. Everything. Not through force. Through influence. The meeting ended in silence. That evening, I stayed alone in my office long after everyone left. The city lights reflected against the windows. For the first time since founding the company, I questioned whether growth had made us a target. Maybe success carried a price no business school ever taught. As I gathered my papers to leave, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored those calls. Something told me not to. I answered. A calm woman's voice greeted me. Mr. Cole. Who's speaking? A brief pause. Then she answered. Evelyn Mercer. Every muscle in my body tightened. I've been hoping we'd finally meet. I remained silent. She continued. You're making this much harder than it needs to be. What do you want? Another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. I don't want to buy your company. I frowned. Then why attack it? Her voice stayed perfectly calm. Because I need your technology before someone else gets it. The line went quiet for a moment. Then she added one final sentence. And if you refuse, the next move won't be about business. The call disconnected. I stared at the dark screen in my hand. Whatever this had become, it was no longer just a corporate battle. It had crossed into something far more dangerous. I listened to the recording of the phone call 3 times. Each time, Evelyn Mercer sounded exactly the same. Calm. Patient. Completely in control. She never raised her voice. She never made an obvious threat. Yet every sentence carried the same message. She believed she had already won. The next morning, I invited Marcus Whitmore back to our headquarters. When he entered the conference room, I played the recording. He closed his eyes before it even finished. I know that voice, he said quietly. You've spoken with her before. Marcus nodded. Only once. He explained that nearly 8 years earlier, Evelyn had invited him to a private dinner in Manhattan. No assistants. No lawyers. Just the 2 of them. She never mentioned buying Titan Capital. She never discussed stock prices. Instead, she asked dozens of questions. About leadership. About technology. About institutional investors. About long-term strategy. At the end of dinner, she handed Marcus a business card. Nothing more. A month later, one of Titan's largest shareholders quietly sold its position. 6 months after that, Northbridge appeared as a new investor. Marcus looked at me. She never forces companies to surrender. She waits until they believe surrender is their only option. That sentence stayed with me. Because I had already seen the pattern. Pressure. Uncertainty. Isolation. Then an offer that appeared reasonable. Not because it truly was. But because every alternative had become worse. It was psychological as much as financial. Our board needed to understand that. That afternoon, I presented a new strategy. We stop reacting. Confused faces looked back at me. We've spent weeks responding to attacks. From now on, we make them respond to us. For the first time since the crisis began, the room felt energized. Instead of defending every rumor, we would demonstrate our strength. Within 48 hours, we announced the largest product launch in company history. A new generation of our AI platform. Designed specifically for pension funds and insurance companies. It reduced reporting time dramatically. Improved fraud detection. Strengthened regulatory compliance. Most importantly, it had already completed successful pilot programs with several major institutions. The announcement surprised the market. Analysts expected us to delay expansion. Instead, we accelerated it. Investors noticed. So did clients. Requests for demonstrations tripled within a week. For the first time, headlines focused on innovation instead of controversy. Northbridge responded immediately. 2 investment firms suddenly withdrew from negotiations. An industry conference canceled my keynote speech without explanation. A trade publication published another anonymous report questioning our governance. Different tactics. Same objective. Create uncertainty. But something had changed. This time, customers didn't panic. They asked questions. We answered them. Transparency became our greatest advantage. Then came an opportunity nobody expected. The largest public pension fund in the Midwest announced a competitive review for a 10-year technology contract. The value exceeded $1 billion over its lifetime. Winning it would transform our company. Losing it would strengthen our competitors. Naturally, Northbridge-backed firms entered the competition. The process lasted nearly 3 months. Technical demonstrations. Security reviews. Financial audits. Independent testing. Every detail mattered. Our engineers barely slept. Neither did I. On the morning of the final presentation, I arrived early. The evaluation committee consisted of 12 people. Investment professionals. Technology experts. Cybersecurity specialists. Public officials. Their questions were relentless. How would our models perform during market stress? How did we prevent bias? What happened if data sources failed? Could anyone manipulate the recommendations? We answered everything. Not with promises. With evidence. When the meeting ended, one committee member stopped me near the elevator. I've reviewed technology vendors for 20 years. He smiled slightly. You were the only CEO who spent more time discussing risk than profit. I thanked him. 3 weeks later, the decision became public. We won. The contract was the largest in company history. Employees celebrated throughout the headquarters. Our share price reached a new high. Clients who had delayed decisions suddenly returned. Momentum had shifted. For the first time, Northbridge appeared vulnerable. That evening, I received another call from Evelyn Mercer. Unlike the previous conversation, she didn't sound disappointed. She sounded curious. Congratulations. Thank you. You've exceeded my expectations. I didn't respond. She continued. Do you know why I invested in your company before anyone else? No. Because I believed you would become exactly who you've become. Her answer made no sense. If that's true, why try to destroy us? A soft laugh came through the phone. I'm not destroying anything. I'm testing it. The words unsettled me. Testing what? Whether your company is strong enough to survive what's coming. My heartbeat slowed. What are you talking about? For the first time, Evelyn hesitated. Only for a second. Then she spoke. There are organizations much larger than mine. Silence. They've started asking about your technology. I frowned. Who are they? Another pause. When she answered, her voice had lost all confidence. I've spent 30 years avoiding them. They don't negotiate. They don't compete. They acquire. And if acquisition fails, they make sure the opportunity disappears. The line remained quiet. Finally, Evelyn said one last sentence. I wasn't your biggest problem, Nathan. I was buying time. The call ended. I remained standing in my office long after the screen went dark. For months, I believed Northbridge was the final opponent. Now the woman who built it was telling me she had been preparing for someone else. Someone powerful enough to make even Evelyn Mercer sound afraid. Outside my window, the city looked exactly the same. Traffic moved through the streets. Lights filled the skyline. People hurried home after work. Everything appeared normal. But deep down, I knew normal had ended. Because whatever was coming next would change far more than one company. It could change the future of the entire financial industry.